Bullied teen buys coffee for stranger, unaware. They're a record exec about to change his life. Wasn't just a random sequence of events for 16-year-old Noah Parker. It was the moment his fractured world began to reassemble itself, though he wouldn't understand that until much later. The coffee shop's warmth enveloped Noah as he stepped inside, a welcome contrast to the biting November chill and the even colder hallways of Westlake High. His fingers, raw from clutching his backpack straps too tightly, tingled as he flexed them. Another day of navigating the minefield of sideways glances, whispered comments, and shoulders deliberately slammed into his. Another day of pretending not to hear when Tyler Jenkins and his friends called him piano freak or knocked his lunch tray to the floor. Noah rubbed at the fresh bruise blooming on his forearm, hidden beneath his worn flannel shirt. The physical pain was manageable. It was the other kind, the hollow ache that spread through his chest each morning as he forced himself out of bed, that threatened to consume him entirely. The line at Melody's Coffee was mercifully short. Behind the counter, Diane, the owner who sometimes let Noah play the upright piano in the corner during slow afternoons, offered him a gentle smile. "The usual, sweetheart?" she asked, already reaching for a large cup. Noah nodded, fishing out the crumpled $5 bill he'd saved from his weekend job restocking shelves at the local grocery store. The money was supposed to go toward his studio fund, a pathetically small collection of cash hidden in an old shoebox under his bed, meant for recording equipment that seemed increasingly out of reach. But today, after Tyler had accidentally spilled water all over the composition notebook where Noah kept his songs, he needed the comfort of hot chocolate with extra whipped cream more than he needed another $3 in his shoebox. As Diane prepared his order, the bell above the door chimed. Noah glanced over his shoulder to see a man enter, his expensive-looking coat dusted with snowflakes, dark circles shadowing his eyes. There was something both imposing and vulnerable about him. The way he carried himself with confidence, yet seemed profoundly tired. The man joined the line behind Noah, absently scrolling through his phone, his forehead creased with concentration. "Here you go," Diane said, sliding Noah's hot chocolate across the counter. "One liquid hug as ordered." Noah managed a small smile. "Thanks, Diane." As he turned to head toward his usual corner table, he heard the man behind him sigh and mutter something about a dead phone battery. The stranger patted his pockets with increasing frustration, then ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I'm sorry," he said to Diane. "I think I left my wallet in the cab." Noah hesitated, his fingers tightening around his warm cup. The $3 he had left wouldn't make much difference to his pitiful savings, but they might mean something to the stranger who looked like he was having an equally rough day. Before he could overthink it, Noah turned back to the counter. "I'll get his coffee," he said quietly, placing his remaining money on the counter. Both Diane and the stranger looked at him with surprise. "You don't have to do that, kid," the man said, his voice gravelly but kind. Noah shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It's okay. Seems like you might need it more than I need the money right now." Something flickered in the man's eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred weary spirit. "Thank you," he said simply, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Reed." "Noah Parker," he replied, his palm disappearing into the man's firm handshake. "What brings you here in the middle of a school day, Noah Parker?" Marcus asked as Diane prepared his black coffee. Noah shifted uncomfortably. He'd left school during lunch period, unable to face another class where Tyler and his friends would find new ways to torment him. "Just needed a break," he mumbled, his eyes fixed on the floor. Marcus seemed to sense the weight behind those words. "Mind if I join you? I could use a break myself." Before Noah could formulate a response, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. School called. "Where are you? Everything okay?" "I should go," Noah said, suddenly remembering the real world that waited outside the coffee shop's steamed windows. "My mom." "Of course," Marcus nodded. "Thanks again for the coffee." It's a rare thing these days, kindness from a stranger. Noah offered a half smile and turned to leave, but Marcus called after him. "That's a musician's callus," he said, pointing to Noah's fingertips. "Guitar? Piano?" Noah froze, surprised by the observation. "Both. Mainly piano, though." Marcus's expression shifted, a spark of interest cutting through his fatigue. "Any good?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with more significance than either could articulate. Noah thought about the songs locked in his notebook, the melodies that flowed through his head during sleepless nights, the compositions that were his only true voice in a world determined to silence him. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "No one really listens. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, studying Noah over the rim of his cup. I would. Those two words, spoken with such simple certainty, caused something to stir in Noah's chest. A fragile, dangerous thing called hope. Maybe next time, Noah said, backing toward the door. I'll hold you to that, Marcus replied. I'll be here tomorrow, same time. Without my wallet, probably. A small, genuine laugh escaped Noah's lips, the first in what felt like weeks. Bring your wallet, but I'll be here. The cold air hit Noah's face as he stepped outside, but it didn't seem quite as bitter as before. He pulled his phone from his pocket to text his mother, unaware that the stranger, sipping coffee at his expense, was already searching Noah Parker musician on his newly charged phone and finding nothing. Yet, Noah's fingers hovered over the piano keys, trembling slightly as they always did before he played. The empty classroom was his sanctuary during lunch periods, when Ms. Bennett, the music teacher, pretended not to notice him slipping in to use the baby gran while she ate in the staff room. It was the one place in school where the whispers and jeers couldn't reach him, where the melodies in his head could finally escape. He pressed down, the first chord resonating through the room, vibrating in his chest like a second heartbeat. His eyes closed as he surrendered to the music. His own composition, something that had come to him the night before while he sat on his bedroom floor, back against the wall, trying to block out his parents' muffled arguments about bills and his father's sporadic work schedule. The piece started tentatively, like a question asked in the dark, unsure if anyone was listening. Then it built, gaining confidence, weaving a story of longing and resilience that Noah could never articulate with words. His body swayed as his fingers danced across the keys, pouring everything he couldn't say into the melody. He was so lost in the music that he didn't hear the classroom door open, didn't notice Tyler Jenkins and two of his friends enter until the jarring sound of someone deliberately hitting a cluster of bass notes shattered his concentration. Well, if it isn't Piano Freak, Tyler sneered, looming over Noah. Playing your sad little songs again? Noah's hands froze above the keys, his momentary peace evaporating. Leave me alone, Tyler. Or what? Tyler challenged, leaning closer. You'll write a song about me? Play me a lullaby? His friends snickered, emboldened by Tyler's cruelty. One of them, a boy named Derek, reached for Noah's backpack and upended it, sending notebooks, textbooks, and loose sheets of staff paper cascading to the floor. Oops, Derek said with mock innocence. Barry. Butterfingers. Noah stood up abruptly, the piano bench scraping against the floor. Just stop, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. What did I ever do to you? Tyler's face hardened. You exist, he said simply. With your music and your perfect grades and your special talent, walking around like you're better than everyone when you're nothing. You're a nobody. Each word landed like a physical blow. Noah bent down to gather his scattered belongings, willing himself not to show how deeply the words cut. As he reached for his composition notebook, Tyler's foot came down on it, the sole of his sneaker smudging the penciled notes. I heard your parents fighting again last night. Tyler continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. My mom says your dad can't keep a job, that you guys might lose your house. Is that why you're always wearing the same 3 shirts? Is that why you're so desperate for a scholarship? Noah's cheeks burned with humiliation. Tyler lived 2 houses down, close enough to know too much about the Parkers' struggling finances, about his father's depression that made holding jobs difficult, about the mounting tension in their home. Back off, Noah muttered, tugging his notebook from under Tyler's foot. Make me, Tyler challenged, shoving Noah's shoulder hard enough to make him stumble backward. Noah regained his balance, fingers curling into fists at his sides. For one wild moment, he imagined striking back, releasing all the pent-up frustration and hurt in one satisfying punch. But the moment passed. Violence wasn't his language. It never had been. Instead, he gathered the last of his papers, shoved them into his backpack, and headed for the door. Tyler's foot shot out, tripping him. Noah crashed to the floor, his palms slapping against the cold linoleum as he caught himself. Laughter echoed behind him as he pushed himself up and fled the classroom, his vision blurring with unshed tears. He didn't stop until he reached the school's side exit, bursting through the doors into the crisp afternoon air. Only then did he realize he had left his composition notebook behind. Noah leaned against the brick wall, trying to steady his breathing. He couldn't go back. Not now, not with his dignity already in shreds. The notebook would have to wait. With shaking hands, he pulled out his phone and texted his mother. Not feeling well. Going to Melody's for a bit before coming home. He didn't wait for a response. His feet carried him automatically toward the coffee shop, the only place besides his bedroom and the music room that felt safe. As he walked, he pulled his hood up against both the cold and the possibility of being recognized by anyone from school. The familiar smell of coffee and baked goods enveloped him as he pushed open the door to Melody's. The afternoon crowd was sparse, a couple of college students with laptops, an elderly man reading a newspaper, and in the corner, to Noah's surprise, Marcus Reed. The man from yesterday was seated at a small table, papers spread before him, a half-empty coffee cup at his elbow. He looked up as the bell above the door announced Noah's arrival, recognition and then concern crossing his face as he took in Noah's reddened eyes and hunched posture. "You're early," Marcus said simply, gesturing to the chair across from him. Noah hesitated, then slowly approached. "I didn't think you'd actually be here." "I said I would be," Marcus replied, gathering his papers to make room. "And I brought my wallet this time." A ghost of a smile flickered across Noah's face as he sank into the chair. Up close, he could see that Marcus was older than he'd initially thought. Maybe mid-40s, with strands of silver threading through his dark hair and fine lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. "Rough day?" Marcus asked, signaling to Diane behind the counter. Noah nodded, not trusting his voice. Diane approached their table, concern evident in her motherly gaze. "The usual, honey?" she asked Noah, who nodded again. "And I'll have another black coffee," Marcus added. "Put the young man's order on my tab." After Diane left, a silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but expectant. Noah found himself studying the papers on the table. They appeared to be contracts of some kind, filled with legal jargon and signature lines. His eyes caught on a logo at the top of one page. Illuminate Records. "You work in music?" Noah asked, momentarily distracted from his own troubles. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You could say that. I'm an A&R executive at Illuminate Records. Talent scouting, artist development, that sort of thing." Noah's eyes widened slightly. Illuminate wasn't the biggest label, but they represented several indie artists he admired. Musicians known for their authenticity and emotional depth rather than commercial appeal. "That's catty and cool," Noah said inadequately, suddenly self-conscious about his earlier claim to be a musician. "Some days it is," Marcus agreed with a wry smile. "Other days it's just like any job. Deadlines, pressure, politics." He tilted his head, studying Noah. "So piano and guitar, you said. Write your own stuff?" Noah looked down at the table, nodding. "I was working on something new today, but..." He trailed off, the memory of his notebook under Tyler's foot sending a fresh wave of dejection through him. But, Marcus prompted gently. "It doesn't matter," Noah mumbled, grateful when Diane returned with their drinks, creating a momentary diversion. Marcus didn't press. Instead, he took a sip of his coffee and gestured toward the upright piano in the corner of the coffee shop. "That thing in tune?" Noah glanced at the piano, an old but well-maintained instrument that Diane's late husband had played. "Mostly. The A-flat sticks sometimes, and the highest octave is a little sharp, but it's decent." "Show me," Marcus said, the simplicity of the request belying its weight. Noah's heart hammered against his ribs. "Show you what?" "Whatever you were working on today." Whatever got interrupted. The invitation hung in the air between them, terrifying and tempting. Noah wrapped his hands around his hot chocolate, absorbing its warmth. I don't have my notebook, and You don't need a notebook if it's your music," Marcus said quietly. "It's already in you." Something about the way he said it, with absolute certainty, as if stating a simple fact, made Noah's throat tighten. He looked around the coffee shop, noting the few patrons absorbed in their own activities. "No one's paying attention," Marcus assured him, seeming to read his thoughts. "And if they do, maybe they need to hear something beautiful today." "I know I do." Noah's gaze returned to Marcus, searching his face for any sign of mockery or pity, but finding only genuine interest. Slowly, he rose from his chair and approached the piano. His legs felt leaden, his fingertips numb with anxiety as he settled onto the bench and lifted the cover from the keys. He placed his hands in position, took a deep breath, and began to play. The opening notes were hesitant, affected by his nerves, but as the melody unfolded, everything else receded. The coffee shop, the other patrons, even his awareness of Marcus watching. There was only the music, flowing from somewhere deep inside him, telling the story he couldn't voice. The loneliness, the yearning to be heard, the small, stubborn flame of hope that refused to be extinguished despite everything. The piece built gradually, growing in complexity and emotion. Noah's fingers found the keys instinctively, The music both an escape and a confrontation, facing his pain and transforming it into something that, if not beautiful, was at least honest. When the final notes faded, his hand stilled above the keys, and he became aware of a profound silence in the coffee shop. Slowly, he turned to find every person in Melody's looking at him. The college students had removed their earbuds, the elderly man had lowered his newspaper, and Diane stood frozen behind the counter, a coffee pot suspended in midair. Marcus sat exactly as Noah had left him, but his expression had changed, a mixture of surprise and something Noah couldn't quite identify. Then from the back of the shop, someone began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound swelling until it filled the small space. Noah felt heat rise to his face, unused to attention that wasn't negative. He ducked his head and quickly returned to the table, his heart racing. That, Marcus said when Noah sat down, was not what I was expecting. Noah stared into his hot chocolate. Sorry, it's not really finished, and I'm still working on the middle section. Noah, Marcus interrupted, leaning forward. That wasn't a criticism. That was extraordinary. What do you call it? I don't. I haven't named it yet. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Some things are too important to name hastily. He pulled a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. I'd like to hear more. Not today. You look like you've had enough for one day. But soon. Noah picked up the card, the embossed logo of Illuminate Records catching the light. Is this real? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. As real as what I just heard? Marcus confirmed. I came to town for a different reason entirely, but maybe this is why I really ended up here. He paused, considering his next words carefully. I'd like to schedule a proper audition, with better equipment and fewer distractions. Would that be something you're interested in? Noah stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the cruel twist that would reveal this as just another elaborate form of mockery. But Marcus's gaze remained steady, sincere. Why? Noah finally managed. Why me? Marcus's expression softened. Because in this business, I hear hundreds of technically proficient musicians every year. What I rarely hear is someone who plays like they're having a conversation with their own soul and inviting others to listen in. He leaned back, taking another sip of his coffee. That kind of authenticity can't be manufactured or taught. It's either there or it isn't. And you, Noah Parker, have it in spades. Noah's fingers closed around the business card, its edges pressing into his palm. A tangible reminder that this moment was real, that someone had finally heard him. I'd need to talk to my parents, he said, his practical side asserting itself through the haze of disbelief. Of course, Marcus nodded. Have them call me. We'll set something up that works for everyone. As Noah tucked the card carefully into his wallet, a text notification lit up his phone screen. His mother. Coming home soon? Dad's having a rough day. Reality crashed back in. The magical bubble of the coffee shop, of being seen and valued, began to dissolve against the pressing concerns of home. His father's struggle with depression, his mother's exhaustion from working double shifts, the mounting bills that kept them all awake at night. I have to go, Noah said, gathering his backpack. Marcus nodded in understanding. Think about what I said. The offer is genuine. Noah stood, a tumult of emotions making it difficult to form coherent thoughts. Thank you, he said simply, the words inadequate for the gift Marcus had given him. Not the prospect of an audition, but the validation that his music, his voice, mattered. As he headed for the door, Marcus called after him. Noah, whatever happened today, before you came here, it doesn't define you. Remember that. Noah paused, the unexpected kindness catching him off guard. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak, and stepped out into the fading afternoon light. The business card in his wallet felt like a talisman against the approaching evening, against whatever awaited him at home, against Tyler Jenkins and all the others who had never bothered to listen. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Noah walked with his head up, his steps lighter than the circumstances warranted. Because for a brief, shining moment, someone had heard the music he carried inside him and deemed it worthy of attention. The kitchen table was covered in bills. White and yellow envelopes spread like fallen leaves across the worn wooden surface. Noah's mother, Elena, sat with her head in her hands. Calculator and checkbook open before her. She looked up when Noah entered, quickly arranging her features into a smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. Hey, sweetheart, she said, gathering the bills into a pile. Feeling better? Noah nodded, setting his backpack on a chair. Where's Dad? Elena's smile faltered slightly. lying down. It's been a hard day for him. Noah understood what that meant. His father, once a vibrant high school music teacher with an infectious enthusiasm for life, now spent many days battling the crushing weight of depression that had overtaken him after budget cuts eliminated his position 3 years ago. The series of jobs that followed, retail, office work, delivery driving, never suited him, and each inevitable ending pushed him further into despair. "I made chicken soup," Elena said, rising to stir a pot on the stove. "Should be ready soon." Noah moved to her side, noticing the new lines around her eyes, the silver strands multiplying among her dark hair. At 42, his mother looked a decade older, worn down by working as both a daytime receptionist at a dental office and an evening cashier at the supermarket. "I'll set the table," he offered, reaching for bowls in the cabinet. "Thanks, honey." She paused, studying him. "You sure you're okay?" "The school called about you missing afternoon classes." Noah busied himself with arranging spoons and napkins. "Just needed some space." "It's fine." Elena touched his arm gently. "Noah, if something's happening at school..." "It's fine, Mom," he repeated firmly. "Really?" She didn't look convinced but didn't press further, returning her attention to the soup. "Your father and I are trying to figure some things out," she said after a moment, gesturing vaguely toward the pile of bills. "The mortgage company called again today." Noah's stomach tightened. They'd been behind on payments for months now, his father's sporadic employment and his mother's modest income barely covering essentials. The prospect of losing their home hung over the family like a storm cloud, growing darker with each passing week. "I could get more hours at the grocery store," Noah suggested. "Mr. Linden said they need help on Sundays too." Elena shook her head. "Absolutely not. Your job is to focus on school and your music. That scholarship is our best hope for your future." The Berklee College of Music Scholarship, a dream that seemed increasingly unrealistic given Noah's inability to afford proper recording equipment or professional lessons. Still, it was the goal that kept him practicing until his fingers cramped, the possibility that sustained him through the worst days. "About my music," Noah began, his hand moving to his pocket where Marcus's business card resided. "Something happened today." The sound of shuffling footsteps interrupted him. John Parker appeared in the kitchen doorway, his tall frame slightly stooped, his face gaunt beneath several days' worth of stubble. Despite his disheveled appearance, Noah's father retained the handsome features that Elena fell in love with 20 years ago. The same features Noah had inherited, along with his musical talent. "Hey, Dad," Noah said, trying to infuse his voice with a cheerfulness he didn't feel. John offered a wan smile. "Hey, kiddo. Heard you weren't feeling well today." Noah exchanged a quick glance with his mother. "Just needed some air. I'm okay now." John nodded, moving to the table and noticing the hastily gathered pile of bills. His shoulders slumped further. "Any miracles in the mail today?" he asked Elena, his attempt at humor falling flat. "Not today," she replied softly, bringing the pot of soup to the table. "But we'll figure it out. We always do." The familiar refrain hung in the air as they settled around the table, a family ritual that felt increasingly hollow with each repetition. Noah ladled soup into his father's bowl, then his mother's, trying not to notice how his father's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his spoon. "I had an interview today," John announced, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "Office manager position at that new medical clinic on Elm Street." Elena's face brightened. "John, that's wonderful. How did it go?" "Pretty well, I think," he said, a hint of his old confidence showing through. "They seemed impressed with my organizational experience from the school. Said they'd call by the end of the week." Noah felt a surge of hope. His father had good days and bad days, but the good ones had become increasingly rare. Seeing him engaged, making an effort, it meant everything. "That's great, Dad," Noah said sincerely. "They'd be lucky to have you." John smiled at his son, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand briefly. "Thanks for believing in your old man, Noah." The moment of connection warmed Noah more than the soup. He took a deep breath, deciding that now, in this brief window of optimism, was the time to share his news. "Something happened today," he began again, setting down his spoon. At Melody's coffee, both parents looked at him expectantly. "I met someone yesterday, a man named Marcus Reed. He's an A&R executive at Illuminate Records." Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out the business card, placing it on the table between them. "He heard me play today and he wants me to audition." Officially, silence followed his announcement, his parents staring at the card as if it might dissolve into the tablecloth. "Illuminate Records?" his father finally said, picking up the card. "They represent Caleb James, don't they?" And that band you like, what are they called? Lunar Tide. Noah supplied, surprised and pleased that his father remembered. Yeah, they do. Elena looked skeptical. How did this happen? You just met a record executive randomly at a coffee shop? Noah explained about buying Marcus's coffee, their conversation, and the impromptu performance at Melody's that afternoon. As he spoke, he watched his parents' expressions shift from confusion to cautious interest. He says it would be a proper audition with equipment and everything, but he wanted me to talk to you first. Have you call him to set it up? John studied the business card intently. Professional instincts from his teaching days surfacing. This seems legitimate. Illuminate is a respected indie label. He looked at Noah, something like pride flickering in his eyes. I always told you your music was special. It's just an audition. Noah cautioned, not wanting to build expectations too high. It probably won't lead to anything, but it might. Elena said, reaching for Noah's hand. And that's more opportunity than most people ever get. She hesitated. Is this what you want? Noah thought about the feeling he'd experienced at the piano and Melodies. The sense of being truly heard for perhaps the first time in his life. Yes, he said simply. I want this chance. John handed the card back to Noah. Then we'll call Mr. Reed tomorrow and make it happen. For the briefest moment, they were just a family again, united by a common purpose, buoyed by possibility rather than weighed down by circumstance. Noah felt his throat tighten with emotion. Thank you, he said quietly. They finished their meal in a lighter atmosphere than the Parker household had known in months. After helping with the dishes, Noah retreated to his bedroom, a small space dominated by an electronic keyboard his parents had scraped together money to buy for his 14th birthday. The ancient desktop computer beside it ran music software that was several versions out of date, but it was enough to record his compositions in their most basic form. Noah sat on the edge of his bed, Marcus's card in his hand, still struggling to process the day's dramatic shift. From the humiliation in the music room to the unexpected validation at Melodies, it felt like emotional whiplash. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Still have your notebook. Meet me by your locker tomorrow morning if you want it back. Who's shocking to Tyler? Noah's momentary peace evaporated. Of course, Tyler wouldn't simply return the notebook or leave it with a teacher. He had to make it an opportunity for further torment. Sighing, Noah set his phone aside and moved to his keyboard. He switched it on, connected his headphones to avoid disturbing his parents, and began to play, softly at first, then with increasing intensity as he worked through the emotions of the day. The melody he'd performed at Melodies evolved under his fingers, gaining depth and complexity as he explored new harmonies and counterpoints. For hours, he lost himself in the music, the outside world receding until there was nothing but the notes flowing from his mind to his fingertips. When he finally stopped, exhaustion settling over him like a heavy blanket, he realized he'd composed the most honest piece of music he'd ever created. A musical journey from despair to cautious hope. He saved the composition file, naming it simply Chance. Then, placing Marcus's card carefully on his nightstand, Noah fell into bed and into the deepest sleep he'd had in weeks, his dreams filled with melodies instead of fears for once. The morning air bit at Noah's face as he approached Westlake High, his breath forming small clouds that dissipated in the wind. He'd left home early, stomach knotted with anxiety about the upcoming confrontation with Tyler. His composition notebook contained months of work, ideas, fragments of melodies, lyrics that he'd never shown anyone. The thought of Tyler destroying it, or worse, sharing its contents with others, made Noah feel physically ill. The school was relatively empty this early, with only a few teachers' cars in the parking lot and a handful of students gathered near the entrance. Noah made his way to his locker, scanning the hallway for any sign of Tyler or his friends. The corridor remained deserted as he approached the dented metal door emblazoned with the number 217. Noah leaned against the adjacent wall, checking his phone repeatedly as minutes ticked by. Just as he began to think Tyler had played a cruel joke, that he had no intention of returning the notebook at all, footsteps echoed down the hall. Tyler appeared alone, his tall frame sauntering toward Noah with deliberate slowness, the black composition notebook tucked under his arm. Showed up, huh? Tyler said, stopping a few feet away. Figured you would. Noah straightened, fighting the instinct to hunch his shoulders or look at the floor. Just give me my notebook, Tyler. Tyler held it up, examining the cover with exaggerated interest. I was curious what kind of sad, pathetic songs the piano freak writes. He flipped through the pages. Did some reading last night. You've got serious issues, Parker. Heat rushed to Noah's face. The idea of Tyler reading his most private thoughts, his vulnerable lyrics about loneliness and not belonging, made him feel violated. "It's private," Noah said, his voice tight. "Just give it back." Tyler's expression shifted subtly. "Why do you do it? Write all this emotional crap that no one will ever hear?" The question caught Noah off guard. There was something almost genuine in Tyler's tone, a curiosity beneath the usual mockery. "Because it's the only way I know how to make sense of things," Noah answered honestly. "Because sometimes words aren't enough." Tyler studied him for a long moment, then abruptly tossed the notebook at Noah's chest. He caught it reflexively, clutching it against his body like a shield. "Whatever," Tyler said, his voice regaining its hard edge. "It's still pathetic." Noah expected Tyler to walk away, but he remained rooted in place, a strange tension vibrating between them. After several uncomfortable seconds, Tyler spoke again, his words surprising Noah. "My dad found your pills," he said flatly. Noah blinked in confusion. "What?" "Your dad's antidepressants. My dad saw the prescription when he was helping your mom bring in groceries last week." Tyler's mouth twisted. "He told my mom your dad's a mental case who can't hold down a job." They were laughing about it. The casual cruelty of adults discussing his father's illness, like neighborhood gossip, made Noah's stomach turn. But more surprising was the emotion flickering across Tyler's face. Not smugness or satisfaction, but something that looked almost like shame. "Your dad was my favorite teacher," Tyler continued, his voice lowered. "In middle school, his music class was the only one I didn't hate." Noah stared at him, struggling to reconcile this information with the Tyler he knew. The one who had made the past 2 years of high school a living nightmare. "He used to say I had potential," Tyler added, a bitter note creeping into his voice. "Before he got fired and turned into whatever he is now." Understanding dawned slowly. Tyler's animosity had never been random. It was tangled up in disappointment, in watching someone he'd admired fall apart. "He's sick, Tyler," Noah said quietly. "Depression is an illness, not a choice." "Yeah, well, my dad says it's just weakness," Tyler replied, but the conviction behind the words seemed hollow. "Says your dad just needs to man up." "Your dad's wrong." The blunt statement hung in the air between them. Tyler's jaw tightened, but he didn't lash out as Noah expected. Instead, he looked away, his posture suddenly less certain. "Whatever," he repeated. "I gave you your stupid notebook." No, we're done here." As Tyler turned to leave, Noah found himself speaking again. "He's getting better," he said. "My dad, he had a job interview yesterday." "A good one." Tyler paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Good for him," he said, the words lacking their usual sarcasm. Before Noah could respond, the school's front doors burst open, and a stream of students began filling the hallway. The private moment shattered, Tyler's face hardening into its familiar mask of disdain. "Stay out of my way, Parker," he said loudly enough for others to hear, shoving past Noah with deliberate force. But as their shoulders collided, something passed between them, a fleeting moment of recognition, of seeing each other clearly for perhaps the first time. It wasn't friendship or even reconciliation, but it was a crack in the wall of animosity that had seemed impenetrable only days before. Noah watched Tyler disappear into the crowd, then carefully placed his recovered notebook in his backpack. The morning's confrontation had left him unsettled but somehow lighter, as if understanding Tyler's motivations had diminished their power to hurt him. As he headed to his first class, Noah's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from his mother, called Mr. "Read this morning. Your audition is set for Saturday at 2 p.m. at Illuminate's regional studio downtown. Dad and I are so proud of you." Noah read the message twice, his heartbeat accelerating. Saturday, 3 days away. A mixture of excitement and terror coursed through him. This wasn't just playing in a coffee shop or his bedroom. This was a legitimate audition with a real record executive. He typed back, "Thanks, Mom. Tell Dad I love him." Then added almost as an afterthought, "I need to practice." Throughout the school day, Noah moved through his classes in a daze, his mind constantly returning to the upcoming audition. What would he play? Should he bring original compositions or cover established songs? How many pieces should he prepare? The questions multiplied with each passing hour, his anxiety building alongside his anticipation. By the time the final bell rang, Noah had made a decision. Instead of heading home, he made his way to the music room, relieved to find it empty. Miss Bennett was erasing the whiteboard, her back to the door as Noah entered. "Miss Brett E. Bennett?" he called softly. She turned, her kind face lighting up with a smile. "Noah, perfect timing. I was hoping to catch you today. Noah approached hesitantly. Though Mrs. Bennett had always been supportive of his musical pursuits, he rarely sought her out directly, preferring to practice alone during lunch when the room was empty. I need some advice, he said, setting his backpack on a chair. Something's happened. Something big, I think. Ms. Bennett set down her eraser, giving him her full attention. I'm listening. Noah explained about Marcus, the impromptu performance at Melodies, and the upcoming audition. As he spoke, Miss Bennett's expression shifted from surprise to excitement. Noah, that's extraordinary, she exclaimed when he finished. Illuminate is a wonderful indie label with a reputation for developing authentic artists. You've heard of them? Noah asked, relieved. Of course. I follow the industry closely. She studied him with newfound interest. You know, I've always thought your compositions were exceptional, but you've been so private about your music that I didn't want to push. Noah looked down, embarrassed by the praise. I don't know what to do for the audition. What to play, how many pieces, whether to do originals or covers. Miss Bennett considered for a moment. For an A&R executive like Mr. Reed, authenticity will matter most. He wants to hear your voice, your perspective, not how well you can imitate others. She gestured to the piano. Play me what you performed at the coffee shop. Nervously, Noah sat at the baby grand, the keys cool and familiar beneath his fingers. He began the piece that had so captivated Marcus, losing himself in the music as he always did. When he finished, he looked up to find Ms. Bennett watching him with an expression of profound respect. That, she said simply, is what you play for your audition? That and perhaps 2 other original pieces that showcase different aspects of your compositional range. She moved to sit beside him on the bench, one that demonstrates technical skill and one that reveals emotional vulnerability. Noah nodded, mentally cataloging his compositions. I have a few ideas. May I make one suggestion? Miss Bennett asked. When Noah nodded, she continued. Consider adding vocals to at least one piece. If you're comfortable with that, your voice is an instrument too, and lyrics can convey emotion in ways that instrumental music alone sometimes cannot. The suggestion made Noah's anxiety spike. He occasionally sang while composing, but never for an audience, not even his parents. His voice felt too personal, too revealing. I don't know if I can, he admitted. Miss Bennett placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You don't have to decide now. But remember, the most powerful music comes from places of honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. She smiled encouragingly. Whatever you choose, Noah, this is your moment. You've earned it. The validation from a teacher he respected bolstered Noah's confidence. As he gathered his things to leave, Ms. Bennett called after him. Noah, would you like to use the music room to practice after school this week? I can arrange to leave it open for you until 6 p.m. The offer touched him deeply. That would be amazing. Thank you. You're welcome. And Noah, her expression grew serious. No matter what happens on Saturday, remember that your worth as a musician and as a person isn't determined by one audition. Noah nodded, grateful for the reminder. I'll try. As he left the school building, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the campus. Noah took a deep breath of the crisp air, feeling like he was standing at the edge of something momentous, a dividing line between who he had been and who he might become. With renewed purpose, he began the walk home, already composing in his head, preparing for the chance he never thought he'd have. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intense preparation. Noah divided his time between school, practice sessions in Ms. Bennett's classroom, and late nights at his keyboard at home. He selected 3 original compositions for the audition. The piece Marcus had already heard, which he titled Turning Point, a technically complex composition that showcased his piano skills, and a simpler, more vulnerable piece with lyrics that he was still uncertain about performing. By Saturday morning, exhaustion and nerves had left Noah feeling almost detached from reality. He stood in his bedroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror as he buttoned a borrowed dress shirt, one of his father's. Slightly too large, but the nicest thing available. His mother had insisted on ironing it to perfection, her way of channeling her own nervous energy. A soft knock at his door preceded his father's entrance. John Parker looked better than he had in weeks. Cleanly shaved, hair neatly combed, dressed in his best sweater and slacks. The sight gave Noah a surge of hope. His father's good days had been coming more frequently since the job interview, which had led to a second interview scheduled for the following week. Almost ready? John asked, adjusting Noah's collar with gentle hands. Noah nodded, his throat too dry for speech. I want you to know something. His father continued, his voice steady in a way it hadn't been for months. Whatever happens today, your mother and I couldn't be prouder of you. Not just for this opportunity, but for who you are. Your kindness, your perseverance, your incredible talent. Emotion welled in Noah's chest. Dad, John placed his hands on Noah's shoulders, meeting his son's gaze directly. I know I haven't been present ... for too much of the past few years. My illness took so much from all of us. His voice thickened. But I want you to know I've heard you playing, even on my worst days. Your music has been a lifeline for me, Noah. A reminder of beauty when everything else seemed dark. Tears pricked at Noah's eyes. I didn't know. I should have told you, John acknowledged. Should have said so many things. But I'm saying them now, and I'll keep saying them because you deserve to hear them. He squeezed Noah's shoulders gently. You're extraordinary, son. And today, Marcus Reed is going to confirm what we've always known. Noah stepped forward, embracing his father tightly. Thank you, he whispered, the words encompassing gratitude for so much more than the immediate encouragement. When they separated, both wiping at damp eyes, Elena appeared in the doorway, car keys in hand. It's time, she said softly. The drive to Illuminate Records' regional studio in downtown Cedar Falls took 20 minutes that felt like both an eternity and an instant. Noah sat in the back seat, his composition notebook clutched in his hands, silently running through the pieces in his head. His parents maintained a supportive silence, understanding his need to concentrate. The studio was housed in a converted warehouse, its brick exterior unassuming but for a small, elegant sign bearing the Illuminate logo. As they parked across the street, Noah's nerves threatened to overwhelm him. I can't do this, he said suddenly, panic rising in his throat. Elena turned in her seat to face him. Yes, you can. You've been preparing for this moment your whole life, even if you didn't know it. What if I mess up? What if he doesn't like it? John's voice was calm, grounding. Then you'll have had an experience most musicians only dream of, and you'll keep creating music because that's who you are. Noah took a deep breath, his parents' unwavering faith steadying him. Okay, he said finally. Let's go. The studio's reception area was modern and minimalist. Concrete floors softened by area rugs, exposed brick walls adorned with framed album covers from Illuminate artists. A young woman with vibrant blue hair greeted them from behind a sleek desk. You must be Noah Parker, she said warmly. I'm Zoe, Mr. Reed's assistant. He's been looking forward to meeting you. Again, she added with a smile. Noah managed a wobbly smile in return. These are my parents, John and Elena Parker. Zoe shook their hands. It's wonderful to meet you all. Mr. Reed is just finishing up a call. Would you like some water or coffee while you wait? Before they could respond, a door opened and Marcus Reed emerged. He looked more polished than he had at the coffee shop, dressed in dark jeans and a blazer over a button-down shirt. But his eyes held the same genuine warmth when they landed on Noah. The Parker family, he said, approaching with extended hand. Thank you for coming. As Marcus greeted his parents, Noah noted how at ease the executive seemed, how naturally he put them all at ease despite the intimidating setting. After brief introductions, Marcus turned to Noah. Ready to show me what you've got? He asked simply. Noah nodded, though ready was the furthest thing from how he felt. Excellent. Marcus gestured toward the door he'd emerged from. We'll use Studio B. It has a beautiful Steinway that I think you'll enjoy. He glanced at Noah's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, you're welcome to join us, or Zoe can show you to our lounge if you'd prefer. John and Elena exchanged looks. We'll wait in the lounge, Elena decided, squeezing Noah's hand. This is your moment. Noah felt a flicker of relief. As supportive as his parents were, the thought of performing his most personal compositions with them watching added a layer of pressure he didn't need. I'll take good care of him, Marcus assured them. Zoe, would you mind? As Zoe led his parents to the lounge, Marcus guided Noah through the door into a spacious recording studio. The room was divided by a glass partition. On one side, a control room filled with mixing equipment. On the other, a performance space dominated by a magnificent grand piano. What do you think? Marcus asked, watching Noah's reaction. Noah stared at the Steinway, its polished surface gleaming under the studio lights. It's beautiful, he breathed. Go on, Marcus encouraged. Get acquainted while I set up. While Marcus moved to the control room and adjusted settings on the equipment, Noah approached the piano with reverence. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys, testing their weight and response, then played a quick scale, marveling at the instrument's rich, resonant tone. After a few minutes, Marcus's voice came through a speaker. "Whenever you're ready, Noah. No pressure, no rush. This is just about the music." Noah positioned himself on the bench, his composition notebook open beside him, though he rarely needed to reference it when playing. He closed his eyes, centering himself, then began with Turning Point, the piece Marcus had heard at Melodies, now refined and expanded through days of intensive practice. The music flowed more freely than Noah had dared to hope, his fingers finding the perfect weight and timing on the responsive keys. He lost himself in the composition, forgetting the microphones, forgetting Marcus watching through the glass, forgetting everything but the story he was telling through sound. A journey from isolation to connection, from despair to possibility. When the final notes faded, Noah opened his eyes to see Marcus leaning forward in his chair, completely still, an expression of intense concentration on his face. After a moment, he pressed a button on the console. "That was remarkable, Noah." His voice came through the speaker. "Even better than at the coffee shop. Would you tell me about this piece?" What inspired it? Noah hesitated, unused to articulating the emotions behind his music. "It's about feeling invisible," he said finally. "About moving through the world with something to say, but no one listening. And then finding someone who finally hears you." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I hear you," he said simply. "What else do you have for me today?" Encouraged by the positive response, Noah moved to his second piece, the technically complex composition he'd titled Labyrinth. This one was faster, more intricate, showcasing his piano skills through challenging runs and precise dynamics. As he played, he could feel himself relaxing into the performance, confidence building with each measure. When he finished, Marcus again offered praise, this time commenting specifically on Noah's technical proficiency and emotional control. Then came the moment Noah had been dreading. "Do you have one more piece for me?" Marcus asked. Noah's hands hovered above the keys. This was the moment to decide, to play his third instrumental composition as planned, or to take Ms. Bennett's advice and share the piece with vocals. "I do," he said, his voice barely audible. "But it's different from the others. I sing in this one." Marcus's expression registered interest. "I'd love to hear that." Taking a deep breath, Noah began to play the introduction to Unheard, a simpler piano arrangement supporting lyrics he'd written during one of his darkest periods, when the bullying at school had been at its worst, and his father's depression had seemed bottomless. The words spoke of invisibility, of shouting into a void, of the desperate need to be recognized as real. As he began to sing, his voice emerged tentatively at first, then with growing strength. It wasn't a technically perfect voice, slightly rough around the edges, with an earnestness that professional training might have polished away, but it carried raw emotion that resonated through the studio. "I stand before you, plain as day. You look right through me anyway. These words I speak, they disappear, like I was never even here." The chorus built in intensity, Noah's fingers pressing harder into the keys as his voice rose with conviction. "But I am real, I'm flesh and bone, more than the pain that I've been shown. If you would listen, you would hear the truth that I've been screaming clear." By the final verse, Noah had forgotten his nervousness, forgotten where he was, pouring every ounce of his experience into the performance. When the last note faded, silence filled the studio. A silence so complete that Noah could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. He looked up slowly, afraid of what he might see in Marcus's expression. But what he found wasn't disappointment or indifference. Marcus sat motionless, one hand pressed against his mouth, his eyes suspiciously bright. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus stood and walked from the control room into the performance space. He approached the piano slowly, as if gathering his thoughts. "Noah?" he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically rough. "How old are you?" 16, Noah answered. Marcus shook his head in wonder. 16, he repeated. "I've been in this business for 20 years, and I can count on one hand the number of 16-year-olds I've met who can write and perform with that level of emotional intelligence." Noah stared at him, scarcely breathing. "The technical skill is impressive," Marcus continued, "but that's not what makes you special. What makes you special is your ability to translate human experience into sound, to make the listener feel what you feel." He paused. "That's rare at any age. At 16, it's extraordinary." Hope unfurled in Noah's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "So, what happens now?" he asked, hardly daring to believe this conversation was real. Marcus leaned against the piano, considering. Typically, with an artist your age, we'd start with development, pairing you with co-writers, producers, vocal coaches. But I'm hesitant to over-polish what's already working so beautifully in its raw form. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the piano's glossy surface. What I'm thinking is an EP, 5 or 6 songs recorded here with minimal production. Just you, the piano, and that honest voice of yours. Noah's mind raced to catch up with Marcus's words. An EP? You mean, you want to sign me? I want to offer you a development deal, Marcus clarified. It's a step toward a full recording contract, but with some guardrails appropriate for your age and education status. He smiled at Noah's stunned expression. We'd work around your school schedule, of course. Education still comes first. I don't know what to say, Noah admitted, overwhelmed. You don't need to say anything right now, Marcus assured him. This is a big decision that you should discuss with your parents. There will be contracts to review, terms to negotiate. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another business card. This one for an entertainment attorney. I'd recommend having someone like this review everything before you sign. It's important that you understand exactly what you're agreeing to. Noah took the card with trembling fingers. This is really happening? Marcus's expression softened. It's really happening, Noah. Your talent created this opportunity, but it was your kindness that opened the door. Never forget that. The mention of kindness brought Noah full circle to that moment in Melody's coffee when he'd impulsively bought coffee for a stranger. A small gesture that had somehow altered the trajectory of his life. Can I tell my parents? He asked, a smile breaking across his face. Absolutely. Marcus laughed. Let's go find them. As they walked toward the lounge, Noah felt as though he were floating, untethered from the weight that had pressed upon him for so long. His mind raced with possibilities. Songs he would record, his parents' reaction, what this might mean for their financial struggles. When they entered the lounge, John and Elena rose immediately, their expressions anxious and hopeful. One look at Noah's face told them everything they needed to know. He's incredible, Marcus told them simply. Elena's hands flew to her mouth as tears sprang to her eyes. John stood straighter, pride radiating from him in almost visible waves. I want to offer Noah a development deal with Illuminate. Marcus continued, explaining the concept of an EP and the terms he had in mind. As the adults discussed details, scheduling, compensation, legal considerations, Noah stood slightly apart, still processing the seismic shift occurring in his life. A week ago, he had been a bullied teen with fading dreams. Now he stood in a professional recording studio, being offered the chance to share his music with the world. Eventually, the conversation wound down, with plans made for a follow-up meeting the following week after they'd had time to review the preliminary contract. Marcus would email them. One last thing, Marcus said as they prepared to leave. I'd like to play the recordings we made today for a few key people at the label. With your permission, of course. Noah looked to his parents, who nodded encouragingly. That would be fine, he agreed. Marcus walked them to the exit, shaking hands with John and Elena. When he reached Noah, he clasped the young man's shoulder. Remember what I said the first day we met? About kindness from a stranger being a rare thing? When Noah nodded, Marcus continued. What's even rarer is finding authentic talent combined with genuine character. That's what makes an artist worth investing in. Not just skill, but soul. He squeezed Noah's shoulder gently. You have both in abundance. As they stepped outside, the afternoon sunlight seemed brighter somehow, the world more vivid. Noah walked between his parents toward their car, the three of them quiet with the weight of possibility. I'm proud of you, Noah, his father said finally, his voice steady and clear. The voice of the man he had been before. Depression dimmed his light. So very proud. Elena slipped her arm around Noah's waist. We both are. And whatever comes next, that won't change. Noah looked between them, feeling a surge of love so intense it nearly took his breath away. This moment wasn't just about his music or his future. It was about their resilience as a family, about finding their way back to each other through the darkest of times. I love you guys, he said simply. As they drove home, Noah gazed out the window at the familiar streets of Cedar Falls, seeing them with new eyes. The coffee shop where it all began came into view, and he smiled at the thought of Diane, who had created a space where a chance encounter could change everything. His phone buzzed with a text message. Expecting it to be from Marcus, Noah was surprised to see Tyler Jenkins's name on the screen instead. Heard you weren't at school yesterday. Something happened? The message was neutral, lacking the usual barbs. perhaps a continuation of the subtle shift Noah had sensed during their last interaction. After a moment's hesitation, Noah typed back, "Something good. Really good. I'll tell you about it Monday." He didn't know if this represented a true change in their relationship or merely a temporary truce. But he did know that the walls he'd built around himself, walls of fear, insecurity, and isolation, were beginning to crumble, allowing room for new connections, new possibilities. As Cedar Falls flowed past his window, Noah closed his eyes and listened to the music already forming in his mind. A new composition about transformation, about the power of small kindnesses, about finding your voice after years of silence, about a bullied teen who bought coffee for a stranger, unaware that the simple act would change his life forever. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, the melody in Noah's head wasn't tinged with sadness or longing. It was bright with hope, with the promise of being heard at last. 6 months later, Noah stood in the wings of the Cedar Falls Community Theater, watching as Marcus addressed the crowd gathered for the launch of his EP, Unheard. Music has the power to connect us across all boundaries. Marcus was saying to the assembled audience of local media, high school students, and community members, it reminds us that our most personal experiences are often our most universal. That's what I felt the first time I heard Noah Parker play. That rare sense of recognition, of someone articulating emotions I'd felt but couldn't express. From his vantage point, Noah could see his parents in the front row, his father looking healthier than he had in years, now 3 months into his new position as office manager at the medical clinic. Beside them sat Miss Bennett, who had become something of a mentor during the whirlwind months of recording and preparing for this moment. In the second row, surprisingly, sat Tyler Jenkins, who had undergone his own transformation since their confrontation in the school hallway. The bullying had stopped gradually, replaced by an awkward but genuine interest in Noah's musical journey. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was a kind of peace, one that had spread through the school as Noah's story became known. So without further delay, Marcus concluded, "I'm honored to introduce Illuminate Records' newest artist. Please welcome Noah Parker." Applause filled the theater as Noah stepped onto the stage, seating himself at the grand piano. The spotlight felt warm on his face as he adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of familiar faces. People who had known him only as the quiet, bullied teen, now watching him with newfound respect and curiosity. "Thank you all for coming," Noah said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Before I play, I want to share something with you. 6 months ago, I was at the lowest point of my life, feeling invisible, voiceless, convinced that nothing would ever change." He paused, finding his parents' encouraging smiles in the front row. "Then I bought a cup of coffee for a stranger." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, who had by now heard the story of Noah and Marcus's chance encounter. What I didn't realize then was that kindness, even small acts of kindness, creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Those ripples can change lives, not just the lives of others, but our own as well. Noah's fingers found their position on the keys, comfort flowing through the familiar contact. This EP is called Unheard because for so long, that's how I felt. But the truth is, we all want the same thing: to be seen, to be heard, to know that our existence matters. He took a deep breath. "This first song is for anyone who's ever felt invisible. You're not. I see you. I hear you. And your voice matters." As Noah began to play the title track, his voice rising clear and strong above the piano's rich tones, he caught sight of Marcus at the back of the theater, nodding in approval. The man who had once been a stranger was now a mentor, a champion, and in many ways a friend. The music filled the space, touching each person in ways Noah couldn't have anticipated. The classmate who wiped away tears, recognizing her own struggles in his lyrics. The local reporter who sat straighter, reminded of his own youthful dreams. The group of students who had once walked past Noah without seeing him, now unable to look away. In that moment, Noah understood with perfect clarity that his journey wasn't just about music or success or even personal redemption. It was about connection, the profound human need to reach across the void and say, "I am here. I feel, I matter." As the final notes of Unheard faded into silence, then erupted into enthusiastic applause, Noah Parker, once bullied, once invisible, sat in the spotlight, fully seen at last. And in the faces of those watching him, he recognized the truth that had been waiting for him all along. that sometimes it takes being truly heard to find your voice. The coffee he had bought for a stranger hadn't just changed his life. It had reminded all of them, that in a world of noise and indifference, simple kindness still speaks the loudest.